Please be seated. I'll be uncharacteristically brief in one part just to save my voice. I've got the 5:30 sermon tonight too, and I've got to make it there. But also because we've covered so much of this territory over the last couple of weeks. I remember preaching a sermon what seems like 2 months ago on the beginning of this section in the Gospel of Mark, where we see in two different stories of blind men being healed, really the story of the disciples. And the first blind man is healed, and it takes a couple of minutes. He doesn't get it right away, right? He is partially healed, and Jesus comes back to him. Those were the disciples. No matter how many times Jesus tried to get it to them, get it across, they kept missing it. They could not see instantly because they could not accept what it would mean to receive it instantly. Jesus kept telling them, pick up your cross and follow. Or Jesus would encounter the rich young man and say, for you, you've done everything else, but go and get rid of everything that you own, sell it and give it to the poor, and then come and follow me. It's so difficult to follow Jesus. But with Bartimaeus, we see the end of that story. And what we're supposed to see is us. We're supposed to get it right. We have the benefit of knowing everything else that Jesus is going to do and how the story ends. Bartimaeus is different. He hears that Jesus is calling him presumably in the same way that Jesus had called Peter and James and John and Andrew and all the rest of them, right? And what does he do? He throws off his cloak. There are two really important things that you need to know to get it, all right? So one, back in, I believe, Exodus, there is this one verse of the Bible that becomes actually quite important in the practice of Judaism. If your neighbor pawns his cloak, return it to him by the end of the day. It's a command of God. If a poor person wakes up in the morning and needs food, he can take his cloak and pawn it and it would be virtually worthless, but get a little bit of money and go buy some food, right? But by the end of the day, the person he had pawned it to has to come back and say, here's your cloak back. It was the perpetual security blanket, quite literally, right? You would always have at least that. The last possession, probably. The last thing to keep him from outright desperation. Mother Caroline mentioned to me this week another piece of that puzzle that I did not know previously, which is that when we think of beggars on the street, we typically think of them as having a cup, right? No cups. So typically what they would have had is their cloak held out to catch the pennies that people would throw in, right? So when he casts it off, not only is he throwing away his security blanket, the very last thing he has, but also anything he collected during the day, gone. And then he goes straight to Jesus. He gets it in a way that none of the disciples got it. Does that make sense? Right? So this is the uncharacteristically brief part. If that makes sense and you nod your head, which I would encourage you to do, that's the end of the lesson, right? That's it. But because we have the benefit of seeing it from the perspective of people who've been witnesses of the resurrection in our own lives, so to speak, we can see the power that action has in a way that the first disciples probably could not. And here, I think, is the spiritual point, because I know that I'm never going to be like Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus is the ideal. He is the foil from a literary perspective. He's the one who's supposed to make me look at myself and go, oh yeah, I don't get it, right? But he helps me get it and get a little bit closer to it. Because what Bartimaeus knows is the thing that I think all of us know, but sometimes we're afraid to admit. That being able to see the kingdom of God and act on it, being able to give recklessly or joyously of whatever it is we have, that's directly correlated to how grateful we are and how well we understand the gifts of God. Full stop. I'll say it one more time, though. Our ability to give gifts, to be generous to others, is directly correlated to our gratitude for the things that God has given us. Bartimaeus is insane, reckless, tosses it out and goes and follows in this perfect, ideal sort of way because he knows exactly who this man is that's calling him. I don't. I think I do sometimes. But if you were to look at my gratitude for it, most of the time I stop short somewhere. And I just pray that the next day I might be a little bit more grateful, right? Bartimaeus knows something that I hope for, something that I have partial faith in, but somewhere deep down, I'm not quite as reckless. It becomes then my prayer, and it's really my prayer for all of us, that every single day, and I really do pray this twice a day. This is not like sermon fodder. I'm giving you a window into my prayer life. At least twice a day. God, help me to see the gifts you've given me with your own eyes, right? Not the way I want to look at them, because I want to look at that one time where this gift came in or where you saved my life or whatever else, and I want to try to understand it from all these different angles and say, well, I wasn't really that sick. The antibiotics helped a whole lot, whatever. It's the doctors. And it was. But when Jesus is sitting next to me looking at the same thing, Jesus says, yeah, I know. That was me, right? He helps me see it as a gift. So then the second prayer is, if I haven't fallen asleep at night, certainly the second prayer, if I make it there, is this. If I'm that aware of this gift that you've given me, these gifts stretching back to before I was ever even born, help me to get whatever grace I need to be more generous to others. And I can tell you that year after year after year, I figure out a way to be a little bit more generous with talent or with time or with treasure or whatever else. But every single year I understand a little bit further that the gratitude that I show in this world, that I make manifest by the gifts that I give to others, is a paltry sum in comparison to what it should be, to what my heart actually says is real about the gifts that God has given me, including my very existence. Right? So that's the sermon. Right? That's it. Pray today. Pray now if you want to. Stop listening to me. It's fine. Pray tonight. Pray whenever you pray for the ability to see your life that way. Because I promise you, the more you understand yourself as a recipient, the more you participate in the gifts that God is infinitely giving to everyone else, and the more you will be like Bartimaeus who gets it and your life will be full and you will be healed. It doesn't mean your life will be full of money or anything else. Bartimaeus loses from the perspective of the world, right? The very little that he has is gone, and he gains everything. And he's filled. His soul is healthy. He's made well, and he sees the kingdom of God in a way that most of us aspire to but have trouble getting to, right? When people get it like that, we call them saints. Most of us are working on it, not quite there. So I say that's the sermon because you all know it's stewardship season, and I have to say more about stewardship. Here's the transition that hopefully Rick won't watch this video, and please don't tell him I said this, but the fundraising pitch is determining where you want to give your gifts, right? And I would say that Christ Church is a great investment because this community has been a gift to me, and I want to give back, right? But that's got actually very little to do with my soul. Right? That has to do with my generosity back to a place that has given me a great deal. There are a lot of people in this congregation who give very, very little to this church, and I'm not worried about their soul in the slightest, right? Because I know they're grateful, and I see their work in the world and the gratitude that they show and make manifest in the world. So that's a terrible fundraising pitch, right? I'm not worried. I would encourage you to pray about that too. To pray about whether or not your gratitude for this community is matched up to the gifts you give to this community. In terms of money, yes, but in terms of talent and time and everything else too. right? Just to pray about it from time to time. You by now have probably received a stewardship magazine and all this other sort of stuff, and you see the story of yourselves telling each other why you are so grateful. We're about to watch a video that I find exceptionally touching. I watched it for the first time last night because it's not me telling you why it's so important to give to Christ Church. It's you telling you why you do what you do out of your gratitude. And it makes me, in as much as I'm not worried about your souls with gratitude, it makes me profoundly grateful and joyous about the soul of this place. Because the soul of this place is a manifestation of our hearts, right? What this video says and what you show us every single year is that in every aspect of our life together, every year we become a little bit more like Bartimaeus. A little bit more aware and a little bit more grateful of the gifts that God is constantly bestowing upon us, and a little bit more able to give back. A little bit more able to make sure that our generosity in this world matches up with our profound gratitude for what God has given us. And that really is it. We'll turn to the video now. Eric, go ahead.